Now that we have an understanding of ethnography as a whole and how data is collected, let's talk a little bit more about the different types of ethnography and specifically give some examples from the literature in wellness and fitness. So the types of ethnography really are numerous, but the main ones that we'll see, and the most frequent type, is what's called a realist ethnography. It's sort of again, a mode of writing in which the author attempts to enter a culture or group and understand the reality of this group. So it really is attempting to leave all of your personal experiences, the researcher leaves all of his or her personal experiences and biases at the door and tries to describe and understand and learn about this culture from the ground up. It provides a neutral, objective description of how the actors view and make sense of the world. Really tough for the researcher because, again, he or she really needs to act like they know nothing about this group, don't use any of their biases, and understand them from the ground up. It provides a functionalist perspective where each culture that you examine helps us understand a society as a whole. So again, it's typically the most common kind of methodology used within ethnography, and tries to go into things with open eyes and learn about the group from the ground up. Other types of ethnography use some type of frame of reference that we discussed in our previous presentation to understand the culture of this group that we're examining. So again, we talked about these in our kind of intro to qualitative research presentation. Some ethnographies use a grounded methodology where they evaluate a theory that you already have about this group. And then by gathering data and so on, you attempt to evaluate whether that theory holds or not. Critical ethnographies typically use a lens of social justice and power relationships, often applying concepts of race or ethnicity, gender to this group, and our understanding of how the group works and how group culture is affected by those aspects. Again, really kind of a rich way to examine these groups and learn about how different groups, whether it be, again, racial groups, socioeconomic groups, gender, impacts individuals from the actors' perspectives. And again, you can learn some very useful things about these groups by using this critical ethnography as a tool. Conceptual frameworks use concepts derived from other research and applied to current research. So often, previous research might tell you these are the general things that affect a person's behavior after they get injured in an athletic event. Those frameworks that are already kind of pre-designed and so on are then applied to the new study. So again, that's a conceptual framework type of a design that's, again, often used in ethnography when we're examining individuals' behaviors, the beliefs of the actors, and so on. So these are some of the articles that I'm going to share with you. And these are really kind of interesting topics that allow us to see some examples of ethnography and the different types of ethnography. The first study that's listed there is titled Playing with Fire, Masculinity, Health, and Sports Supplements. And what this study does, it uses ethnography, but specifically with a conceptual framework to examine men and their use of sports supplement. These are individuals that are physically active, engaged in gyms, and so on, and some of the pressures and some of the reasons why they potentially utilize sports supplements. The second article listed there is titled Sports Nutritionist Perspectives on Enablers and Barriers to Nutritional Adherence in High-Performance Sport. This ethnography utilized a conceptual framework specifically called the COM-B model that allowed them to examine why sports nutritionists believed that some athletes adhered to the nutritional programs that they created for them, and others did not. It's a really good article for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's up a lot of our alleys. We're interested in nutrition. A lot of us have an interest in nutrition. And it gives us some useful information as to how we can maybe improve adherence to nutritional recommendations or good nutritional choices. They also do a really nice job of describing their methods. So for this class, it really gives you some good information about how ethnographies are carried out. So it's a real good application of the learning that we're doing this week. Another study that's entitled Obese Persons' Physical Activity Experiences and Motivations Across Weight Changes is also a good standard kind of ethnographic study. The culture that they're examining are obese individuals that have lost weight. And again, another solid description of the methods used and highlights some of the aspects of, again, participant observation and so on. The next study that's listed there is called In It Together, a qualitative evaluation of participant experiences in a 10-week group-based workplace high-intensity interval training program for insufficiently active adults. This, again, is a good example of an ethnography, a study of this culture, with a conceptual framework that, again, examines adherence to exercise programs, in this case, specifically a workplace-based high-intensity interval training program. The next study is a qualitative evaluation of the effectiveness of a mental skills training program for youth athletes. So we're seeing more and more that mental skills training is utilized in athletics. What this study attempted to do was to view those groups of youth athletes that were doing this training as a culture, as a group, and they used ethnographic practices to study this group from a phenomenological perspective. And again, the phenomenon was this experience with this mental skills training program. And again, really interesting because we learn a lot about how mental skills training benefit these individuals and what their perceived benefits were. And again, very positive for mental skills training programs. And then finally, the last study I have listed there is a qualitative examination of adolescent girls' sports participation in a low-income urban environment. So what this study does, it's an ethnography specifically using the critical theory because we're looking at how the fact that these individuals are low income and in an urban environment, how that impacts their participation in sports. Again, a real good question. And by utilizing the critical theory perspective with this ethnography, it allows us to, examine this impact from a power perspective, as well as utilizing their socioeconomic status in determining sports participation. So again, what I attempted to do was pull a variety of different articles from the literature that were ethnographic studies in nature and related to our field of interest. So I'll say this in the text of the course as well. You don't have to read them all, but I would encourage you to at least read the abstracts of each one and get an idea of what they measured, how they measure it, how they conducted the study. And then if you only read a couple, again, I would read the Bentley article and the Bombach article, and then the Wright article, because it is very interesting how they use this critical theory perspective in conducting their research. So there are a number of different types of ways to conduct ethnographic studies. In future presentations, we're going to learn some of the other designs that really have shifted far away from ethnographic studies and would be considered to be a different design type. But even within the ethnographic studies that we looked at today in this presentation, we see that there is a lot of variability in some of the methods used and so on. Ethnographic studies are the most common methodology used in qualitative research, and they do a great job of providing us a rich understanding of actors, events, and phenomenon beyond what we could do by using quantitative methods. Ethnographic research relies heavily on participant observation, and remember, participant observation is a very broad term that involves interviews, actual direct observation, covert or overt observation, as well potentially as text analysis.